The sports world was rocked like never before, and it all started with one explosive morning on national television. Stephen A. Smith, arguably the most influential and fearless voice in sports media, unleashed a verbal onslaught that left fans, analysts, and even production crews speechless. The target? Dillon Gabriel, a young quarterback whose recent attempts to carve out relevance in Cleveland had backfired spectacularly. This wasn't just a routine hot take or a segment meant to spark a few clicks. This was a full-scale character demolition, delivered with precision, passion, and a level of intensity only Stephen A. Smith could command. From the very first second, it was clear that Gabriel had walked straight into a buzzsaw, and there would be no escape. On that fateful morning, the cameras rolled, the lights shone, and the studio felt the tension building. Smith, visibly agitated and abandoning his prepared notes entirely, launched into what would become one of the most unforgettable broadcasts in sports media history. 27 uninterrupted minutes of scathing critique followed, dissecting Gabriel's behavior, attitude, and complete misunderstanding of his place within the Cleveland Browns organization. Every word carried weight, every pause added drama, and every gesture seemed calculated to drive home the same message. This is why you never underestimate Stephen A. Smith, and this is why actions, both on and off the field, have consequences. At the heart of the controversy was Gabriel's latest media maneuver, a carefully orchestrated campaign designed to undermine Shedeur Sanders while portraying himself as the victim. But Sanders, the rising star quarterback who had single-handedly reignited hope in Cleveland, was untouchable. Smith saw through the manipulation immediately, and the audience felt the electricity as he called out every misstep, every bit of arrogance, and every miscalculated move with relentless clarity. Fans, media personalities, and even those inside the studio recognized that something historic was unfolding in real time. This opening salvo wasn't just about Gabriel. It was about setting the stage for a drama that would ripple through the Browns organization, the NFL, and even the broader sports culture. It was about power, influence, leadership, and the harsh reality of professional accountability. And it was just the beginning. The drama didn't start in a vacuum. Before Stephen A. Smith's legendary onslaught, there was a spark, a carefully calculated, yet disastrously timed, series of moves by Dillon Gabriel and his camp. Monday evening marked the beginning of a media blitz that would ultimately trigger a week of chaos. Anonymous quotes began surfacing across Cleveland sports outlets, suggesting that the Browns' coaching staff privately questioned Shedeur Sanders' readiness. Implications of favoritism and organizational bias were floated as if carefully planted seeds, intended to take root in the minds of fans, analysts, and even the national media. Gabriel's team had a clear goal: manipulate perception, undermine Sanders, and position their client as the overlooked, deserving competitor. On paper, it seemed clever, a strategic play in the high-stakes chess game of professional sports. But they underestimated the environment they were stepping into. Cleveland was not just another city. It was a city hungry for hope, energized by Shedeur Sanders' meteoric rise, and buzzing with optimism after what insiders called the most successful Browns training camp in franchise history. Season ticket renewals had surged, merchandise was flying off shelves, and for the first time in years, national media coverage of Cleveland was overwhelmingly positive. Sanders was no longer just a quarterback. He was a symbol of excitement, unity, and potential championships. When Gabriel's anonymous quotes hit the airwaves, it was like throwing a Molotov cocktail into a perfectly calm room. Sources within the Browns described the reaction as immediate and visceral. Ownership, rarely involved in day-to-day personnel matters, reportedly summoned Gabriel for an emergency meeting. Jimmy Haslam's message was unmistakable. Shedeur Sanders represents the franchise's present and future. Gabriel had two options: support that vision or find a new path elsewhere. The writing was on the wall, yet Gabriel doubled down. What made this miscalculation so explosive was not just Sanders' talent, but the stark contrast in character and approach. While Gabriel attempted to manipulate narratives behind the scenes, Sanders focused on preparation, leadership, and team chemistry. He didn't court controversy or play games with the media. He let performance and professionalism speak for themselves. The seeds of chaos had been planted by Gabriel, but they were about to be uprooted in real time by one of sports media's most powerful figures. In retrospect, the catalyst was simple: a desperate, poorly executed attempt at relevance colliding with an emerging superstar and a media landscape ready to defend him. The stage was set, tensions were rising, and the players, both on the field and off, were about to collide in a story that would ripple far beyond Cleveland. Tuesday morning on ESPN's First Take became instant history. Stephen A. Smith, visibly agitated and abandoning all prepared notes, launched into a verbal storm that left the studio frozen and viewers glued to their screens. Cameras focused tightly on his expressive gestures as he leaned into the lens, voice sharp, deliberate, and unapologetically commanding. This wasn't casual commentary. This was calculated demolition, the kind of broadcast that transforms sports analysis into theater, where every word lands like a hammer. For 27 uninterrupted minutes, Smith systematically disassembled Dillon Gabriel's recent actions and decisions. Gabriel, attempting to manipulate public perception and undermine Shedeur Sanders, had triggered a response that was equal parts fiery and precise. Smith called out every misstep, the arrogance, the misguided media blitz, and the lack of understanding of Cleveland's team dynamics. He described Gabriel's antics as the behavior of an entitled child throwing a tantrum on Christmas morning, a statement that left even seasoned producers and studio assistants momentarily speechless. The magnitude of the rant was palpable, every syllable designed to expose Gabriel's miscalculations and contrast them against Sanders' rising stature. What made the segment so compelling wasn't just the words. It was Smith's methodical dismantling of Gabriel's narrative. He highlighted the orchestrated media leaks, calling out the coordination and intent behind every anonymous quote, and emphasized how transparent and desperate the campaign appeared. Sanders, by contrast, was portrayed as the embodiment of professionalism, a quarterback who earned his status through performance, leadership, and integrity. The narrative Smith constructed was undeniable. One player elevates the franchise, the other undermines it. Behind the scenes, the impact was immediate. Production staff reported a palpable tension as the segment unfolded, with operators halting routine adjustments, assistants frozen mid-task, and everyone aware they were witnessing something historic. Social media erupted simultaneously, clips circulated rapidly, trending within minutes as fans and analysts alike absorbed the scope of Smith's critique. The energy wasn't just about criticism, it was about accountability, hierarchy, and professional integrity. By the end of the segment, the message was crystal clear. Gabriel's media campaign had backfired spectacularly, and Stephen A. Smith had effectively drawn a line in the sand. This is how professional missteps are exposed when arrogance meets scrutiny. Sanders' rise was validated, and Gabriel's credibility was under assault. The First Take explosion wasn't just commentary. It was a turning point in the Cleveland quarterback saga, signaling a seismic shift in perception, influence, and narrative control. Numbers don't lie, and Stephen A. Smith made sure the world saw every devastating statistic that set Shedeur Sanders apart from Dillon Gabriel. This wasn't opinion masquerading as analysis. This was cold, hard data delivered with theatrical precision, each metric a nail in the coffin of Gabriel's credibility. Sanders' performance in training camp became the centerpiece of Smith's argument. Completion percentages, touchdown to interception ratios, yards per attempt, every category favored Sanders dramatically. Against first-team defenses, Sanders completed an impressive 68% of his passes. Gabriel, facing mostly second-string defenders, struggled to reach 54%. Touchdowns and interceptions told a similar story: 17 TDs and only 3 picks for Sanders, compared to Gabriel's 9 TDs and 7 picks. The numbers painted a stark, undeniable contrast, leaving no room for misinterpretation. Smith didn't stop at raw statistics. He contextualized the numbers, breaking down how they translated to leadership, decision-making, and the ability to elevate a team. Sanders wasn't just completing passes, he was orchestrating plays, commanding the huddle, and inspiring confidence among teammates. Gabriel, on the other hand, appeared to be chasing narratives rather than improving performance. His camp focused on media manipulation rather than mastering fundamentals, and Smith didn't hesitate to point out the consequences. In every measurable aspect of quarterback play, Sanders dominated. The social proof of Sanders' superiority extended beyond stats. Teammates, feedback, coaches' observations, and locker room sentiment all reinforced the narrative Smith built. Offensive linemen, receivers, and veterans noticed the difference in professionalism and approach. Sanders' preparation and maturity stood in sharp contrast to Gabriel's disruptive behavior and questionable leadership. Smith's analysis highlighted that performance isn't just measured by numbers on paper. It's also about influence, respect, and consistency under pressure. By combining quantitative data with qualitative insights, Smith created a comprehensive portrait of excellence versus entitlement. Sanders' metrics validated his franchise quarterback status, while Gabriel's underwhelming numbers exposed the weaknesses his media campaign had tried to obscure. Fans and analysts alike recognized the clarity of Smith's message. In football, actions and results speak louder than propaganda. Sanders' performance metrics weren't just impressive, they were a statement, a public affirmation that talent, preparation, and leadership always prevail over manipulation and hype. In the world of professional sports, where perception often trumps reality, Smith's data-driven demolition of Gabriel's claims became a masterclass in accountability. The numbers told one story, and the narrative, as Smith expertly framed it, left no room for debate. Sanders wasn't just outperforming Gabriel, he was redefining the standard for franchise quarterback excellence in Cleveland. The reverberations of Stephen A. Smith's on-air takedown extended far beyond television screens. Inside the Browns' locker room, the fallout was immediate and profound. Veterans who had previously remained neutral regarding the quarterback competition began rallying around Shedeur Sanders, openly expressing their support for his leadership and professionalism. Offensive linemen, initially cautious in their loyalty, grew frustrated with Gabriel's attempts to manipulate narratives and undermine team chemistry. Receivers and defensive players alike noted the difference in temperament. Sanders elevated those around him, while Gabriel's antics threatened cohesion. The locker room, once divided by uncertainty, began to crystallize around the franchise quarterback. Management's response was equally decisive. Owner Jimmy Haslam, rarely involved in day-to-day operations, reportedly called Gabriel in for a tense, emergency meeting. The message was unambiguous. Sanders represented the present and future of the organization, and any player unwilling to support that vision would face consequences. General Manager Andrew Barry and coaches like Kevin Stefanski and Alex Van Pelt worked quickly to reinforce organizational standards, emphasizing professionalism, unity, and the non-negotiable importance of supporting the team's long-term goals. Practice schedules were adjusted to minimize opportunities for additional controversy, and team meetings focused on accountability and collaboration. Gabriel's inability to gracefully accept criticism only amplified the problem. Rather than acknowledging his missteps, he doubled down through additional anonymous quotes and media appearances, attempting to discredit Smith and justify his actions. The strategy backfired spectacularly, providing Smith with even more material to dismantle Gabriel's credibility. Behind the scenes, team leaders described Gabriel as withdrawn, increasingly isolated, and defeated, a stark contrast to Sanders' calm, focused demeanor. His body language on the practice field and during team interactions reflected someone painfully aware of the growing divide between himself and the organization. Meanwhile, Sanders' response to the storm of controversy further solidified his standing. He maintained composure, avoided public confrontation, and focused relentlessly on preparation and team building. He even reached out privately to Gabriel, offering guidance and support despite their professional rivalry. This act of maturity reinforced Sanders' reputation as a natural leader and highlighted the stark contrast in character between the two quarterbacks. The combination of locker room alignment, management intervention, and Sanders' own professionalism, ensured that Gabriel's media manipulation ultimately accelerated his decline within the organization. What began as a media feud evolved into a full-scale organizational reckoning, illustrating the consequences of disruptive behavior and the power of leadership rooted in integrity and accountability. Outside the locker room and boardrooms, the media and public response to the unfolding drama was instantaneous, explosive, and unforgettable. Stephen A. Smith's unrelenting critique of Dillon Gabriel didn't just make headlines, it ignited a firestorm across every platform imaginable. Social media accounts, fan forums, and sports news outlets erupted with commentary, memes, and viral clips capturing Smith's every pointed critique. Within minutes, Gabriel destroyed and Team Sanders were trending globally, as fans and analysts alike weighed in on the unfolding quarterback saga. Local Cleveland media, many of whom had previously amplified Gabriel's anonymous claims, scrambled to reassess their coverage. Radio hosts pivoted to Sanders-focused content, television analysts abandoned any pretense of a competitive debate, and newspaper op-eds celebrated Sanders, professionalism, and the importance of maintaining locker room unity. Even national commentators, initially intrigued by Gabriel's media maneuvering, quickly recognized Smith's influence and began framing their narratives around Sanders' leadership rather than Gabriel's controversial antics. The rapid shift in public perception was unprecedented. A single, well-articulated, and meticulously prepared media intervention had transformed sentiment almost overnight. Fans themselves became vocal participants in the narrative. Social media campaigns called for Gabriel's trade, release, or indefinite suspension, while Sanders' merchandise sales soared, eclipsing all previous quarterback records in Cleveland's franchise history. Watch parties sprung up for Smith segments, creating communal experiences where supporters gathered to witness every moment of Gabriel's public unraveling. The engagement metrics shattered previous records. Over 15 million views across platforms within 24 hours, dozens of trending clips, and national commentary dissecting every word of Smith's monologues. Even more telling was the way Gabriel's trade value and reputation shifted in real time. Organizations that had expressed interest in acquiring the backup quarterback reportedly reconsidered, wary of inheriting a player whose reputation had been publicly dismantled. Meanwhile, Sanders' standing grew exponentially, solidifying his role not just as a team leader, but as the face of the franchise. Analysts noted the broader implications. Media narratives, when skillfully executed, could drastically affect both player perception and organizational strategy. The public reaction wasn't just about entertainment. It was a lesson in accountability, transparency, and the influence of modern sports media. Gabriel's missteps, magnified through relentless analysis and widely shared footage, became a cautionary tale. Reputation can shift in an instant, and fans, media, and organizations are all watching. In this environment, authenticity, professionalism, and preparation aren't optional. They're the currency of survival in professional sports. As the week progressed, Dillon Gabriel's attempts to regain control only deepened the crisis. Rather than stepping back or accepting his role as the backup quarterback, Gabriel and his representation doubled down, escalating the media campaign through increasingly desperate tactics. Anonymous quotes became more inflammatory, personal attacks grew sharper, and the narrative shifted from professional criticism to targeting Shedeur Sanders' family and character. What was intended as a strategic media maneuver soon morphed into a self-inflicted disaster, a textbook example of how desperation can destroy credibility. Stephen A. Smith, already primed from earlier segments, seized the opportunity with surgical precision. Each new quote, every ill-advised statement, provided ammunition for further dismantling Gabriel's reputation. On Thursday and Friday, Smith's analysis became even more comprehensive and relentless, dissecting Gabriel's collegiate performance, draft position, and readiness for the NFL. Statistics were pulled, inconsistencies highlighted, and weaknesses amplified, creating a public record that left little room for doubt. Gabriel had overestimated his leverage and underestimated the consequences of his actions. The professional ramifications were swift. Brown's management reportedly moved to contain the fallout, reinforcing team standards and emphasizing accountability. Practice structures were modified, ensuring Gabriel could no longer manipulate situations to his advantage, while team meetings underscored the importance of unity over individual agendas. Veterans expressed relief that leadership and media scrutiny had validated their observations about both quarterbacks. Gabriel, meanwhile, reportedly became withdrawn, his confidence visibly eroded as the week of public criticism unfolded. The psychological impact was unmistakable. A player who had sought influence and recognition found himself isolated, defeated, and professionally diminished. Social media mirrored the organizational and locker room response. Fans called for his release or trade, while Sanders' popularity and merchandise sales surged. Analysts and commentators across the country shifted focus entirely to Sanders, effectively erasing Gabriel from the narrative. The broader lesson was clear. In professional sports, perception is as critical as performance, and attempts to manipulate either without substance can backfire catastrophically. By the end of the week, the consequences were undeniable. Gabriel's reputation had been permanently tarnished, his credibility destroyed, and his Cleveland chapter effectively over. Meanwhile, Sanders emerged unscathed, validated by both media and teammates, his leadership and professionalism shining as the clear contrast to Gabriel's miscalculated gambit. What began as a media feud had evolved into a complete and irrevocable professional downfall, demonstrating the perils of ambition untempered by discipline and integrity. The fallout from Dylan Gabriel's missteps and Stephen A. Smith's explosive critique didn't just reshape a single team, it sent shockwaves throughout the entire NFL and sports media landscape. Young quarterbacks across the league suddenly had a case study in professional conduct and media strategy. Actions off the field can be just as career-defining as performance on it. Gabriel's desperate attempts to manipulate narratives demonstrated the high stakes of reputation management, showing that even marginal errors in judgment can snowball into irreversible consequences. Coaches, scouts, and executives observed the events closely, recognizing the importance of cultivating players who combine talent with maturity, discipline, and respect for team hierarchies. The broader lessons extended to organizational strategy as well. Teams witnessed how media narratives can influence locker room dynamics, fan engagement, and even trade valuations. Gabriel's campaign revealed the fragility of public perception and the power of influential media voices to shape player reputations. Conversely, Sanders' poised and professional handling of the controversy highlighted the benefits of leadership rooted in performance, preparation, and character. Organizations began reevaluating protocols for internal communications, emphasizing transparency, team-first behavior, and consistent reinforcement of cultural standards. The incident also transformed the media landscape itself. Analysts and reporters saw the tangible impact of well-researched, passionately delivered commentary. Smith's segments demonstrated that journalism could be both entertaining and a mechanism for accountability, capable of influencing organizational decisions, fan sentiment, and broader narratives. Media literacy among fans increased as they witnessed firsthand how narratives could be manipulated and countered, with evidence and thoughtful analysis. Sports programs, broadcasting courses, and even psychology departments began using the Cleveland quarterback saga as a case study in influence, perception, and professional ethics. Beyond football, the story resonated in wider cultural and educational contexts. Institutions began addressing social media manipulation, the ethics of anonymous sourcing, and the psychological effects of public scrutiny on young professionals. Athletes in other sports and industries took note of the potential fallout from attempting to control public narratives without substance to back it up. The contrast between Gabriel and Sanders became emblematic. Preparation, professionalism, and humility consistently outweigh arrogance, manipulation, or shortcuts. In the end, the saga provided a comprehensive blueprint for understanding modern sports dynamics. It reinforced the idea that talent alone is insufficient. Character, discipline, and the ability to navigate complex organizational and media environments are equally crucial. Gabriel's downfall and Sanders' rise offered enduring lessons for players, teams, and media alike. In today's hyper-connected sports world, every action is observed, every statement analyzed, and every decision carries consequences that extend far beyond the field. The ramifications of the Dylan Gabriel saga extended far beyond Cleveland, transcending the NFL and becoming a global case study in character, media influence, and organizational dynamics. What began as a heated quarterback rivalry evolved into lessons for governments, corporations, educational institutions, and even international sports organizations. Gabriel's attempts at media manipulation drew attention from analysts studying how coordinated narratives could influence public perception, demonstrating that tactics once confined to professional sports could have applications and consequences on a worldwide scale. International sports organizations, including Olympic committees, closely observed the fallout. They recognized that similar tactics could potentially be used to manipulate judging, public opinion, or athlete reputations, highlighting vulnerabilities in oversight and ethical standards. Legal scholars debated the adequacy of existing frameworks to address narrative-based manipulation, raising questions about accountability when misinformation targets individuals rather than nations. Even professional leagues outside the U.S. implemented stricter social media verification policies for players and agents, aiming to prevent artificially generated narratives from disrupting team cohesion or public trust. Beyond sports, Gabriel's saga influenced cultural and societal norms around media literacy, ethics, and accountability. Schools incorporated the incident into curricula, using it to teach students how to identify disinformation campaigns, evaluate sources critically, and understand the consequences of manipulation in public and professional settings. Mental health professionals studied the psychological impact of high-profile media attacks, noting that Gabriel's campaign and subsequent downfall contributed to anxiety and stress among young athletes observing the unfolding events. Institutions responded by strengthening mental health support and media literacy programs to mitigate similar risks in the future. Gabriel's story also served as a modern parable on morality, leadership, and personal responsibility. Religious leaders, motivational speakers, and thought influencers highlighted the narrative as a cautionary tale about pride, envy, and the cost of pursuing personal gain at the expense of integrity. Meanwhile, Sanders' measured, professional response offered a contrasting blueprint for resilience, maturity, and ethical conduct under intense public scrutiny. Even political organizations and corporations took notice, exploring how narrative manipulation could affect public trust and stakeholder perception. Campaign managers and corporate communications teams studied the incident, recognizing the importance of transparency, strategic media engagement, and the reputational risks of unverified messaging. The lessons were clear. Attempts to manufacture influence without substance can spiral into consequences that reach far beyond the original conflict. In sum, what started as a local NFL controversy evolved into an international discussion on ethics, leadership, and the power of narrative. Gabriel's downfall and Sanders' rise became emblematic of the modern age, demonstrating that character, integrity, and professionalism are universally valued, and that manipulation, no matter how clever, carries consequences that ripple far beyond its point of origin. Amid the media storm, Shedeur Sanders' response stood as a masterclass in professionalism and leadership. While Dylan Gabriel's campaign descended into desperation and chaos, Sanders remained composed, focused on preparation, and committed to his team-first mentality. He refused to engage in public confrontations, avoided inflammatory statements, and kept his attention firmly on improving performance and fostering locker room cohesion. This restraint was not passive. It was a strategic demonstration of character, contrasting sharply with Gabriel's reckless maneuvers. Sanders' approach earned immediate respect from teammates, coaches, and the wider sports community. Veterans in the Browns' locker room praised his maturity, noting how he consistently elevated those around him through encouragement, mentorship, and example setting. Offensive linemen, receivers, and defensive players alike recognized the difference in temperament and commitment between Sanders and Gabriel. Whereas Gabriel had attempted to manipulate perceptions and stir discord, Sanders quietly reinforced the culture of accountability and professionalism the organization demanded. This measured response amplified the validation provided by Stephen A. Smith segments. Smith's analysis, grounded in performance metrics, character assessment, and contextual insight, effectively reinforced Sanders' position as the franchise quarterback. By staying above the fray, Sanders allowed Smith's commentary and the data it referenced to speak for itself. Completion percentages, touchdown-to-interception ratios, leadership evaluations, and training camp performance all highlighted Sanders' superior skill set, maturity, and readiness for responsibility. Every time Gabriel attempted to push back through media channels, Sanders' quiet focus only made the contrast more stark, further solidifying public and organizational support. The impact extended beyond perception. Sanders' reputation as a reliable, team-first leader became a cornerstone of the Browns' organizational culture. Coaches cited his ability to handle pressure and adversity as a key factor in building team cohesion. Media outlets highlighted his resilience and grace, using his response as an example of how professional athletes should navigate conflict, scrutiny, and competition. Social media users and fans widely recognized Sanders' composure, drawing comparisons between his constructive behavior and Gabriel's self-serving strategies. Ultimately, Sanders' response validated not only his own character, but also the Browns' organizational decision-making. By maintaining focus, professionalism, and integrity, he reinforced why he was chosen as the team's future, while Gabriel's actions confirmed the consequences of attempting to manipulate perception without merit. Sanders' maturity and poise under pressure transformed a potentially divisive situation into a defining moment of leadership, demonstrating that in professional sports, talent paired with character always prevails over manipulation and hubris.
If you enjoyed today's breakdown and want to keep up with all the drama, trades, and behind-the-scenes action in the NFL, then don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps this channel grow and lets us know you love this kind of content. And hey, don't keep it to yourself. Share this video with your friends, your group chats, or anyone who loves football as much as you do. The more the conversation spreads, the better it gets. Most importantly, if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the channel and tap the notification bell. That way, you'll never miss when we drop fresh stories, wild rumors, or breaking updates that the mainstream media won't talk about.
building player brands and organizational revenue streams. ESPN executives analyzing the Gabriel Destruction Week noted record-breaking engagement metrics, advertising revenue increases, and subscriber acquisition numbers directly attributable to Smith's passionate commentary. The business case for controversial, well-researched sports analysis became overwhelming evidence for network programming strategies. College football programs began incorporating Gabriel's story into their quarterback development curricula, emphasizing mental toughness, character building, and professional preparation beyond physical skill development. The cautionary tale influenced recruiting strategies and player evaluation processes at university levels. Sports psychologists studying the situation published research papers analyzing the psychological factors that led to Gabriel's self-destructive behavior patterns. The academic analysis identified warning signs that coaches and scouts could recognize early in player development processes, potentially preventing similar career-damaging incidents. The legal implications were equally significant as Gabriel's case became precedent for media responsibility, anonymous sourcing verification, and reputation management in professional sports contexts. Several defamation lawsuits referenced Smith's Gabriel destruction as example of justified criticism based on factual evidence and observable behavior patterns. International sports media personalities began adopting Smith's research-intensive approach to player criticism, leading to more substantive analysis and accountability in sports commentary worldwide. The influence extended beyond American football toward global sports journalism standards and practices. Broadcasting schools incorporated the Gabriel destruction segments into their curriculum as examples of effective sports commentary, passionate delivery techniques, and research-based analysis. Future sports media personalities studied Smith's methods for constructing compelling narratives while maintaining journalistic integrity. The technology sector took notice as social media platforms analyzed engagement patterns from the Gabriel controversy, leading to algorithm modifications that prioritize substantive sports content over superficial controversy. The indirect influence affected how sports stories were distributed and consumed across digital platforms. Gabriel's family members reportedly received death threats and harassment from Browns fans who blamed them for enabling his destructive behavior. The extreme fan reactions demonstrated the real-world consequences of media narratives and celebrity influence over public opinion in professional sports contexts. Sanders' family, conversely, experienced overwhelming support from Cleveland community following Smith's defense. Local businesses offered endorsement deals, community organizations invited speaking engagements, and charitable foundations requested involvement in their programs. The positive community response reinforced the benefits of positive media relationships. The religious community embraced Sanders as role model for young athletes, particularly appreciating his mature response to adversity and respectful treatment of opponents despite personal attacks. Several ministries incorporated his story into youth programs, emphasizing character development and spiritual growth through competitive challenges. Academic institutions studying leadership development used the Sanders-Gabriel contrast as case study for business school programs, military academies, and corporate training initiatives. The situation demonstrated principles of leadership under pressure that transcended sports context toward broader professional applications. International NFL fans following the controversy through social media and streaming platforms became deeply invested in the quarterback narrative, leading to increased Browns merchandise sales, game viewership, and social media engagement from global audiences who had previously ignored Cleveland football entirely. The merchandising implications were staggering as Gabriel's Browns jerseys became collector items representing one of sports history's most dramatic career implosions. Conversely, Sanders' merchandise reached record sales levels across multiple demographic categories, establishing new benchmarks for rookie quarterback commercial success. Fantasy football platforms experienced unprecedented engagement as millions of users followed the quarterback controversy, leading to rule modifications, scoring adjustments, and new categories specifically designed to capture narrative-driven player value beyond traditional statistical performance metrics. Sports betting markets were significantly impacted as Gabriel's destruction affected Browns' championship odds, individual player prop bets, and season-long wagering patterns. The controversy demonstrated how media narratives could influence gambling markets and financial outcomes for both bookmakers and bettors. Restaurant chains in Cleveland reported increased business during Smith's Gabriel Destruction Week as fans gathered to watch his segments together, creating impromptu community events around sports media consumption. The economic impact extended throughout local service industries, benefiting from increased social engagement. The fashion industry took notice as Sanders' style choices during press conferences became trending topics, leading to endorsement deals with clothing brands and accessories companies, eager to associate with his positive image and growing celebrity status among young consumers. Music industry partnerships emerged as several hip-hop artists referenced the Gabriel Sanders controversy in their lyrics, with some tracks specifically celebrating Smith's defense of Sanders, while others mocked Gabriel's downfall. The cultural penetration extended beyond sports into mainstream entertainment. Hollywood agents began approaching Sanders about potential movie deals, documentary projects, and television appearances based on his compelling personal story and media-savvy personality. Gabriel's story attracted different entertainment interests focused on cautionary tales about fame, jealousy, and self-destruction. The educational impact reached elementary schools as teachers used the controversy to discuss bullying, jealousy, teamwork, and character development with young students. The simplified narrative became a valuable tool for addressing complex social dynamics in age-appropriate contexts. Corporate America took notice as leadership consultants began using the Sanders-Gabriel dynamic in executive training programs, demonstrating how individual behavior could affect entire organizational cultures and competitive outcomes in high-pressure business environments. The international sports community analyzed the situation as uniquely American phenomenon, reflecting cultural values around competition, media influence, celebrity worship, and individual accountability. Academic papers explored the sociological implications across different cultural contexts and sporting traditions. Looking back, Smith's intervention during Brown's quarterback controversy represented a perfect example of media personality using platform responsibly to defend talent, expose character flaws, and influence positive organizational outcomes. His Gabriel destruction wasn't random entertainment, but necessary correction of false narratives that threatened promising young quarterbacks' development and franchise stability. The legacy endures through continued excellence from Sanders, cautionary tale of Gabriel's destruction, and demonstration of media power over professional sports narratives. Smith's legendary week proved that passionate, accurate commentary could influence career trajectories, organizational decisions, and cultural transformations within professional sports landscape, permanently while creating lasting impact across multiple industries and communities worldwide. But the most shocking revelation came 3 years later when investigative journalists uncovered the full extent of Gabriel's media manipulation campaign. Documents obtained through Freedom of Information Act requests revealed a coordinated effort involving multiple PR firms, social media influencers, and even foreign bot networks designed to artificially amplify negative Sanders coverage while promoting Gabriel's narrative. The scope was breathtaking. Gabriel's representation had hired a Beverly Hills public relations firm specializing in reputation rehabilitation for troubled celebrities. Internal emails showed detailed strategies for targeting specific journalists, timing anonymous leaks, and creating artificial grassroots support through fake social media accounts. The operation cost Gabriel's family over $300,000 in desperate attempt to salvage his career prospects. Smith's reaction to these revelations was volcanic. This man didn't just disrespect Shedeur Sanders. He thundered during a special edition of First Take. He tried to manipulate the entire sports media landscape through lies, fake accounts, and propaganda campaigns. This isn't about football anymore. This is about integrity, honesty, and respect for journalism itself. The investigation revealed Gabriel's team had created over 15,000 fake Twitter accounts, programmed to attack Sanders' character, question his work ethic, and promote conspiracy theories about Brown's ownership favoritism. The bot network had generated millions of impressions, artificially inflating anti-Sanders sentiment while creating false impression of divided fan opinion. Even more damaging were recorded phone conversations between Gabriel's representatives and various media personalities, offering exclusive interviews, inside information, and financial incentives for negative Sanders coverage. Several prominent sports journalists found their careers damaged by association with the manipulation campaign once evidence became public. The FBI launched investigation into potential fraud charges related to the social media manipulation scheme. Federal prosecutors examined whether Gabriel's team had violated election interference laws by using foreign-based bot networks to influence American sports media coverage. The legal implications stretched far beyond sports into national security concerns about information warfare. Congressional hearings followed as lawmakers questioned social media executives about platform vulnerabilities exploited during Gabriel's campaign. The testimony revealed that sophisticated manipulation techniques originally developed for political campaigns were being adapted for sports narratives, raising concerns about broader media ecosystem integrity. Smith testified before Congress about his experience identifying and combating artificial narrative manipulation through traditional journalism methods. His testimony became a powerful argument for supporting legitimate sports media against manufactured controversy, designed to deceive audiences and destroy reputations unfairly. The psychological warfare aspects fascinated military strategists studying modern information combat techniques. Gabriel's campaign represented civilian adaptation of psychological operations normally reserved for international conflicts. Defense Department analysts incorporated the case study into training programs for identifying and countering disinformation campaigns. University journalism schools developed entire courses around the Gabriel manipulation scandal, teaching future reporters how to identify artificial narrative campaigns, verify anonymous sources properly, and maintain editorial independence against sophisticated influence operations. The educational impact transformed sports journalism training permanently. International intelligence agencies studied the techniques used in Gabriel's campaign as examples of how information warfare could be deployed against civilian targets for personal gain rather than national interests. The methods revealed potential vulnerabilities in democratic societies' information ecosystems that required immediate attention. Meanwhile, Sanders' authentic social media presence became textbook example of organic audience building through genuine content and character demonstration. Marketing professors analyzed his approach as contrast to artificial manipulation, showing how authenticity ultimately proved more powerful than manufactured narratives in building lasting audience relationships. The technology industry responded by developing new artificial intelligence systems specifically designed to identify and combat sports-related disinformation campaigns. Gabriel's manipulation techniques became training data for machine learning algorithms, protecting platform integrity against similar future attacks. Law enforcement agencies began incorporating sports narrative manipulation into their cybercrime training programs, recognizing that techniques used against Sanders could easily be adapted for more serious criminal enterprises, including stock manipulation, political interference, and international espionage operations. Gabriel's mental health deteriorated significantly following exposure of his manipulation campaign. Former associates described him as paranoid and delusional, convinced that Smith and Sanders were orchestrating counter-campaigns against him despite no evidence supporting these beliefs. His psychological decline became a cautionary tale about the personal costs of engaging in deceptive behavior. The financial costs extended far beyond Gabriel's initial investment in the PR campaign. Legal fees for defending against multiple lawsuits exceeded $2 million. Reputation management consultants charged additional fees attempting to rehabilitate his image. Lost endorsement opportunities and potential earnings were estimated at over $50 million throughout his career. Sanders, conversely, parlayed his authentic handling of the controversy into unprecedented marketing success. Brand partnerships valued his genuine character and organic audience engagement over manufactured celebrity. His total endorsement earnings surpassed $200 million within 5 years, directly attributable to positive reputation established during the Gabriel controversy. The Browns organization conducted internal review of their media relations protocols following revelation of Gabriel's manipulation campaign. They implemented new verification procedures for anonymous sources, enhanced social media monitoring systems, and established direct communication channels with trusted journalists to prevent future manipulation attempts. NFL League Office created new policies requiring teams to report suspected artificial narrative campaigns to central authorities. The league also established partnerships with social media platforms to identify and eliminate fake accounts targeting players, coaches, or organizations with manufactured controversies designed to influence competitive outcomes. Sports media companies invested heavily in verification technologies and fact-checking personnel following Gabriel's manipulation exposure. The industry recognized that maintaining audience trust required proactive defense against sophisticated disinformation campaigns that could undermine editorial credibility and audience confidence. Gabriel's former teammates from various organizations began speaking publicly about his behavior patterns, revealing consistent history of manipulation, jealousy, and destructive conduct dating back to high school football. The testimonials painted a picture of an individual whose character flaws extended far beyond single incident with Brown's organization. Youth football organizations incorporated Gabriel's story into character development programs, emphasizing the importance of integrity, teamwork, and accepting coaching decisions gracefully. His downfall became a powerful teaching tool for molding young athletes' attitudes toward competition and professional conduct. The international sports community studied Gabriel's manipulation campaign as an example of American sports culture's vulnerability to manufactured controversy and artificial narrative creation. European football officials implemented preventive measures protecting their leagues against similar manipulation techniques, adapted from American precedents. Academic researchers studying the Gabriel case identified psychological profiles associated with individuals likely to engage in narrative manipulation when facing professional disappointment. The research helped develop early warning systems for identifying potentially destructive behavior patterns among professional athletes. corporate whistleblower protection programs expanded to include sports media manipulation after several journalists came forward with evidence of Gabriel's campaign. The legal protections encouraged more media professionals to report attempted influence operations rather than remaining silent about unethical practices. The entertainment industry took notice as Gabriel's story attracted interest from streaming platforms developing documentaries about sports corruption, media manipulation, and social media warfare. Multiple production companies competed for rights to create definitive account of the scandal and its broader implications. Religious leaders used Gabriel's downfall as sermon illustrations about the dangers of jealousy, deception, and pride in competitive environments. His story became a modern parable about character consequences that resonated across denominational boundaries and cultural contexts worldwide. Medical professionals studying the psychological impact of social media manipulation identified Gabriel's campaign as a contributing factor to increased anxiety and depression among young athletes who witnessed the controversy. Mental health support programs were enhanced to address these indirect effects of manufactured sports controversies. The gambling industry implemented new monitoring systems to detect artificial narrative campaigns potentially designed to influence betting odds and market behavior. Gabriel's manipulation revealed vulnerabilities that criminal organizations could exploit for financial gain through coordinated disinformation campaigns. International Olympic Committee officials studied Gabriel's techniques as a potential threat to Olympic competition integrity, recognizing that similar manipulation could be used to influence judge sports, create false doping allegations, or manufacture political controversies during international competitions. Social media influencer marketing underwent significant reform as brands recognized the risks associated with artificial audience manipulation and fake engagement metrics. Gabriel's campaign exposed industry vulnerabilities that required immediate regulatory attention and technological solutions. The Democratic and Republican parties incorporated lessons from Gabriel's manipulation into their campaign security protocols, recognizing that techniques used against Sanders could be adapted for political targeting. Campaign managers began treating sports narrative manipulation as a national security concern, requiring federal oversight. Gabriel's college alma mater conducted investigation into whether university resources had been used to support his manipulation campaign. The inquiry led to policy changes regarding alumni use of institutional communications and social media platforms for personal benefit or commercial purposes. Professional sports leagues worldwide implemented new social media verification requirements for players, agents, and team personnel following Gabriel's manipulation exposure. The policies required disclosure of paid promotional content and prohibited artificial audience manipulation techniques under penalty of suspension or termination. The Gabriel manipulation scandal influenced international law development regarding cross-border information warfare and civilian targeting through narrative manipulation. Legal scholars debated whether existing treaties adequately addressed modern disinformation techniques deployed against individual targets rather than national interests. Sanders' response to the manipulation revelations further enhanced his reputation for grace under pressure. Rather than demanding revenge or pursuing legal action against Gabriel, he focused on positive community involvement and charitable work, demonstrating character qualities that validated every positive assessment Smith had provided years earlier. The long-term career trajectories proved Smith's initial character assessments remarkably accurate. Sanders became perennial Pro Bowl selection and championship contender, while Gabriel never recovered from the scandal's damage to his reputation and psychological well-being. The contrast provided definitive validation of Smith's talent evaluation abilities. Media literacy education programs in schools began using Gabriel's manipulation campaign as primary example of how sophisticated disinformation could target any individual or organization. Students learned to identify artificial narrative techniques and verify information sources through critical thinking skills development. The scandal's international implications led to diplomatic discussions about information warfare protocols and civilian protection measures. Gabriel's targeting of Sanders became case study for potential international agreements governing cross-border narrative manipulation and artificial influence operations. Congressional legislation was introduced requiring social media platforms to implement stronger verification systems and artificial account detection technologies following Gabriel's manipulation exposure. The proposed laws aim to protect individuals against coordinated disinformation campaigns while preserving legitimate free speech rights. Smith's legendary Gabriel Destruction Week became required viewing in media ethics courses worldwide, demonstrating how passionate, well-researched journalism could combat manufactured narratives and protect individual reputations against sophisticated manipulation campaigns. His work established new standards for sports media responsibility and investigative excellence. The ultimate irony emerged years later when Gabriel's manipulation techniques were adopted by authoritarian regimes targeting democratic societies through sports-related disinformation campaigns. His personal vendetta against Sanders inadvertently provided blueprint for international information warfare operations that required substantial government resources to combat effectively. Despite the scandal's revelation, Smith never expressed satisfaction about Gabriel's downfall. Instead, he emphasized the importance of media responsibility, character evaluation, and protecting young athletes against manipulation and exploitation. His handling of the situation demonstrated professional maturity that enhanced his reputation as sports media's most influential voice. The Gabriel manipulation scandal permanently changed how sports controversies were covered, investigated, and understood by audiences worldwide. It revealed the sophisticated techniques available for manufacturing false narratives, while demonstrating the power of authentic journalism to expose deception and protect truth in increasingly complex media environments.